Hi, it's Greg Dean from Vegan Action Global and the Explore Life podcast. And today we are lucky to have an amazing activist with us, Annie Grace from Melbourne, who has been an activist for the animals for quite some time. She is an avid supporter and attendee of Vegan Action Melbourne, Dominion as well, the Dominion movement. Also taking part in duck saves out in the swamps where they do the duck hunting. And so she has a very unique perspective on animal rights and what she has seen with her own two eyes and how we can all connect to that. So whether you're a vegan or you're not a vegan yet, we are aiming to tell the stories of the animals. They can't speak for themselves, so we have activists doing that for them. So welcome on board, Annie, to the Explore Life podcast. I really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about your background, just in general, and how you got to the point of becoming a vegan and a vegan animal rights activist.
Yeah, so I became vegan when I was 15, so that's 5 years now. And yeah, so when I was 15, I was in high school. I had watched Dominion on YouTube, and at the time I had my sister who was also vegan, so I already knew some of that stuff. What happens to the animals, the process they go through. So I always was kind of influenced by her. I was vegetarian beforehand. So yeah, I was 15. And about 2 years later, when I was 17, I got involved with Vegan Action Melbourne, my first ever type of activism. And so yeah, I started with Terry, and I've been doing that for the last 3 years now. I've also branched into other outreach groups, including We the Free and Dominion outreach group. So yeah, I've been doing that for a while now, and I feel that it's a very, really effective kind of way of, having those conversations with people face to face, having, TVs that activists are holding, people are able to see that footage. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. Occasionally I go to vigils. And yeah, I've been doing duck rescue. It was my first year this year. So it was, quite the experience. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
Okay, so I wasn't vegan when I was 15. Okay, and certainly I was aware of certain things going on with animals, and I would call myself an animal lover back then. And I think when I was younger, I remember my mum saying all I would eat was chicken. Still, I would eat the flesh of other animals, but for some reason, I kept, chicken as the edible one, and every other animal I used to say I loved, even though I'd eat those animals. I didn't put myself through or make myself watch footage because I was afraid I would know the truth. I think it takes a really strong mind and a strong heart to actually sit there and do it, regardless of the age, but especially so if you're 15. I mean, yeah, we can watch horror movies and the like when we're teenagers, but to actually see it for real is something that can really affect. So I want to see, first of all, is your sister older or younger than you?
Older.
Okay. And did you watch the footage, the movie with her, the Dominion documentary?
No, I didn't. I just did it by myself. It was a last minute spontaneous decision.
Interesting. Okay. So how did you sit? Did you have to prepare yourself for watching it, or did you just sit there and press play and?
Yeah, I was in my room, and I come across it, and I was like, I think this needs to happen, because in my mind, I knew what was happening to them, and I was very stubborn with making that decision. I totally understand that I was 15, but I was like it's time now. And I think the thing that was stopping me from initially watching it is, being like, yeah, I'm going to see the truth. Therefore, I'm going to go vegan. Therefore, I'm going to be an outsider. But yeah, no, I was in my room and I was like, okay, let's just do it. And I just pressed play and I watched the whole thing. And at first, it was really hard. Had to take a couple of breaks, but I got through the whole thing and it just completely changed me forever.
Mm. I saw it in the cinema when they did their release, and so there's no escape, there's no pause button,
Right.
and you just sat, and that takes a lot because I felt the peer pressure to be there. I wanted to be there. I wanted to help, but realistically, I wasn't going to be the one to leave. Whereas you sat through it yourself. You had the strength to sit through it, and you were at school at the time, like in year 10 or something.
Yeah, I was.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it was back 2020. So I was in year 9.
Okay, so how did your friends react to this? Because I want to kind of get a feel for what life is like when you start becoming an outsider, as we all did at some point, but just from your perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, it was scary at first, but after watching that, I was like, people have to know what is going on. So I kind of just blurted everything out around my friends. And yeah, my friends were very uncomfortable and it brought a lot of tension between us.
Tell me
And I
about that.
was,
What happened? So when you came to school the next day and you'd seen it, what happened? What were you?
yeah, it was like all that was in my mind for the whole day. I couldn't do anything else or like, try and do schoolwork. It was just there. And it's like, how can it not? It's a real life horror story. Um, yeah, I had told some friends and I had some really supportive friends and they were quite on board. I did have some other friends not so on board, but the ones that were, they like listened to me and they were like, that's horrible. And I kind of was like, guys, like you should watch this or, you should have a look at like some information, like these are the things you can do and blah, blah, blah. So they were really supportive, but I did have another group of friends not so supportive. They kind of came from cultures that are very big on eating meat and dairy. And it was the hardest when the most tension between us was when I would go over to their houses and I had to tell their parents or I told them beforehand. And they kind of just flat out were like, no, we're not doing that for you. We're not going to cater. And it's even like, it's really hard to think about this because I was in such a vulnerable position as a 15-year-old. I felt like I couldn't speak up for myself. And there were instances where I was fed the bodies of animals because I was so petrified to like disappoint them, even though I was telling them, I was like, I don't want to eat them. And it was just, I remember just feeling so sick and so ashamed after. It was just the most horrible feeling. And that was kind of when I was like, I can't, go over to my friends' houses anymore. And I would talk to them about this. And, they would try and tell their parents, like, don't feed Annie this. Like, she doesn't want it. They tried. But yeah, then there was kind of like some tension between us. So yeah, it was kind of weird. It was like I had some group of friends that were like, oh, yeah, this is amazing. And then the other ones are like, oh, I think that's really good of you, but not for me. And, their parents kind of just didn't listen. So, kind of looking back at that, I kind of felt bad for myself, but I learnt a lot as well. So, yeah, that was kind of my experience of like communicating with my friends about this whole decision I made.
Interestingly, I wonder how those parents would have reacted if they had said, "Oh, sorry, Annie is allergic to dairy," or that can't handle gluten, for example. They would have
Yeah,
quickly changed for you. But as soon as you bring the moral stance into it, kids
yeah,
are allergic to things all the time.
yep,
Uh, and so schools need to cater and parents need to cater. So
yep,
if you've got little kids and, you're going to your kids are going to go over to a friend's house for a sleepover, you would say, well, by the way, our child is dairy intolerant. And so they know no dairy for that child. But as
Yeah.
soon as, you're standing up for yourself and saying, I can't eat it, this thing for these ethical reasons, suddenly, no, we're not going to cater. Can you imagine if you just changed the reason why?
Yeah. It's insane. And I actually remember one of the parents saying that they're like, she's not allergic, so she can eat it, you know?
Mm,
And that was really hard to hear. I was like, it doesn't need to be, you should respect a child's decision. I just don't
mm.
know how you could do that to someone, like someone's kid. So yeah, no, you're totally right.
It's a societal thing. And from that perspective, even as a teenager, we're all told, well, you don't know any better. And we know better than you know. But you get older and you realize that they knew nothing. It's even adults. I almost see adults as grown-up children, because
Yeah.
even when you're doing outreach with people and they come up with the most insane, inane, and irrelevant excuses to excuse their behaviors, whether it just be being rude to somebody, whether it's trolling online, or whether it's just coming up with excuses for animal abuse, I just don't see that most adults are in a position to uh, put that on younger people, that they know
Mm.
better.
Oh yeah, definitely. Totally
Mm.
right.
So, what are some of the things that you had started realizing from age 15 to 20? Because you become a vegan, and then you become an activist. So, there's a journey there. Take me through that.
Yeah. So I guess for those like first 2 years of being vegan, it was like after watching Dominion, I was like, everyone should know. And then like months later, I was like, oh, because of how people reacted, I was like, oh, maybe I should just stay quiet. Not like no one's gonna want to be my friend. And that actually became a huge thing for me. Um, not speaking up about it. I was like, I'm not going to be that annoying vegan who's going to preach all of their views. So I kind of just kept quiet about it for those first 2 years. And then after those 2 years, when I was 17, I met my partner at the time, who was also vegan. And his dad was already an activist. And I was like, this is amazing. Like, I've always, like, since going vegan, I had wanted to do activism. I was just so scared and didn't know where to start. So I actually started through him, as he was already with VAM, Vegan Action Melbourne. So that's kind of where the activism started. And I remember my first time being with Vegan Action Melbourne. It was petrifying. It was, holding a sign or holding a TV for everyone to see and look at you was just petrifying. But I was like, this is what I've been wanting to do. I want people to see this. And I think it took a couple of months. I think it was like in August I started. And by the time it got to like November, I became a lot more confident. But yeah, at first it was very petrifying. And I was like, oh, I'm too scared of what people are going to think. But from like just starting activism to now, I've seen how much I've grown. Like I've gone from not talking about it at all, letting people try and, dumb me down about it. And now I'm just, loud and proud. Like I don't care. Like I have lost friends over this, and that's fine. They're not real friends if they're not going to support you. And the animals just always come first for me. So definitely in that whole period of like being 15 to then 20, I've become so much more confident. And I'm not afraid to talk about these things, that do make people feel uncomfortable. And I think that's who I've always been. I've always been someone who didn't want to cause any drama or cause, any tension or things like that. So definitely now I'm like, no, I think we need to have these chats and and it's always good to hear people's own experiences, especially with outreach, people who might have like farming background or they've seen footage before. So yeah, definitely in that time, definitely a lot more proud
Did you
about
find
it.
Did you find the first time doing outreach, you said that you were petrified. Did you find it also cathartic?
Yeah, I guess
In
in
a
a
way,
way.
like oh my god, I can't. Oh no, did it with the Anonymous for the Voiceless the first time I put a mask on and held the TV, and they looked at the TV and they came up and I could say nothing, and all I could do was stand there. But you see the look on their
Yeah.
eyes. So I was petrified, but just felt this empowerment because I
Yeah.
was actually doing something.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. I was like, yeah, even though I'm really scared about this, I'm glad I'm doing it. I think it needs to be done. And yeah, I felt very, very proud to be um, with Vegan Action Melbourne and holding a TV for the first time. I was like, this is what I've been wanting to do for such a long time. And I want the animals to be seen. So definitely, in a way, it's like both of them I was feeling at the same time.
So why does it need to be done? Why does activism need to be done through your eyes? Why? Why is it so?
Mm. So many reasons. I think the first one for me, and I've heard this from other activists, I guess compared to other social movements, like human rights, compared to animal rights, animals really do not have anyone to speak up for them. Like, yes, we've got many activist groups, but, if you kind of think globally, there's not as many. And because they don't speak the same language as us, people tend to not listen or just throw that off as, like, oh, animals are animals. Like, they don't feel anything, they can't speak our language, so that, they're not on the same level as humans. I think they're just so overlooked. And I think because they look different from us,
Mhm.
people think, oh, it's not that important. So yeah, definitely because I think they are so overlooked and, they may not look like us, sound like us. So I think that's definitely a reason why. And I guess because another reason, it's like animal agriculture is also destroying our earth. And we are
Mhm.
already in the midst of going towards extinction of animals and the planet. And that's kind of something I always refer to in outreach to people. They're like, why is this important? I'm like, not only is it for the animals, but also the planet, and it's going to be affecting us as well. So yeah, that's definitely another reason. It just has this whole, it just keeps adding on each other.
Mm.
And it's eventually going to affect us. So yeah.
Okay, so this is a kind of a human versus animal type scenario when we talk about human oppression and animal oppression in the eyes of those who show up to protest. And um, you will see hundreds, maybe thousands of people who are willing to show up for the rights of people in different nations, yet they there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going
Yeah.
to put that down. I think that we should be standing up to oppression, but the sheer number of vegans out there, and there's millions of vegans, against the number of animal rights activists who actively show up for the animals. There's such a stark contrast. I'm wondering, where do you think that comes from? What do you think holds a vegan back from showing up to animal rights activists, from showing up to an animal rights activist event, but will still easily attend a human rights event?
That's a good question. I think in my mind, I'm thinking of like what I thought before doing activism.
Sure.
Because like while I was vegan but wasn't an animal activist, I was actually going to protests for human rights or climate change. So I honestly think it could be kind of the fear of being judged, because there's a lot more hate towards vegans, because it makes people feel uncomfortable. I think that's a main thing, because I think that's what I kind of thought when I started animal rights. I think people have that fear of, being judged because it's not as, like popular when it comes to protests. So I think it's, like the fear of being kind of judged or hated. And I think, kind of like what I was saying before, because maybe animals don't look like us as much. People are like, oh, maybe people will look at that as not as important. So that's kind of where I stand. That's like personally what I think might be the reason why.
What's important is what you think, and that's why we are here today, which is why I wanted to interview you, because I see what you do out in the world, and and it's something that everybody should learn from, because you've got a unique perspective. I wanted to start talking about some of the other activism you have done for animal rights, and I've got a few other areas I want to cover of, I guess, vegan thought philosophy. But take me through some of the other work you've done outside of Vegan Action Melbourne.
Yeah. So I've done vigils as well with the Save movement.
What's a vigil? Take
A
me through
vigil.
that.
So a vigil is so when a group of activists come together and we meet outside a slaughterhouse, and we'll be there for the duration of when trucks are coming in with animals. So, for instance, I've been to pig vigils, so outside pig slaughterhouses, and cow and sheep vigils. So we'll stand outside, we'll have high vis on, waiting for the trucks to come in. It really depends on kind of the location you're at. Sometimes the trucks stop. And so we take that opportunity to bear witness to the animals before they're, slaughtered. It's kind of almost like a funeral. It's a very different type of kind of activism, and it's not everyone's cup of tea, which is totally fine. It can be really, really confronting because you are like right there in the midst of it. Definitely for me, the first time going to a vigil, it was just, I knew this was happening, but actually seeing it in real life, I was like, oh my gosh, they're right in front of me. We'll stand outside a slaughterhouse. We'll be there for a couple of hours. Trucks will be coming through. We'll be filming with our phones, filming the animals, in the conditions that they are in when they get to the slaughterhouse, from the farm to the slaughterhouse. Filming that, then waiting for the next truck to come in, keep filming that, and we'll share it on our social media with people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so the idea of a vigil is to capture the moment for the world to see on the camera.
Yes.
Would that be one of the main goals of attending a vigil?
Yeah, I think it might be different for some people. For me, it's, I guess, a bit of both, because I just want to be there in general for the animals, have, even if they might not be able to tell the difference between a kind human and, the slaughterhouse workers or the humans that they've interacted with in the past. I think for me, because I don't always post after I go to a vigil, I try as much as I can, but some days it's just, I just want to be there for them. I just want to look into their eyes and, tell them we're sorry and, we're trying. So I think it's a bit of both personally for me. But yeah, I definitely try and get footage out there, because it really can make a difference. But yeah.
So you've touched on something that I would really relate to, is showing somebody that last moment of love.
Yeah.
Is that what you're there for?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's quite in a way, a special moment to look into those animals' eyes, and just some of them that come through, it's just, you can see it in their eyes how tired they are, especially like mother dairy cows that have been spent, or sows coming in, and then they'll have their like the 6-month-old pigs, on the level below them, and I look in their eyes and they're so tired, because normally like with pigs they make a lot of noise, but kind of with the sows they can be quiet at times, and you can just see the stress like on their body, all the injuries that they have, and you just look in their eyes and you can just see them, how tired they are. Like they're looking at you and they're just like, I'm done. I've gone through so much, and it's just you do feel helpless in a way. And I've talked to other activists about this, and they've asked me like, why are you doing it? Like you can't do anything, and I'm like, I do understand that. You can feel helpless and hopeless some days. Some days are harder than others. So yeah, it's a really hard moment, and I think all of us activists are there for each other as well, to support each other.
It's a connection to life.
Yeah,
it's seeing one life and your life, and nobody would have the same reaction if they were to see a watermelon being cut up or an orange being cut up. Nobody has a problem with that. But when you are there, and you as just a clear-minded human being connecting on that level with another suffering being, where I've seen it. I've seen pigs with scars all over them and cuts and bruises, no teeth because they were ripped out when they were piglets, no tails, no hair on them, just bred to suffer immeasurably on a grate, and then being taken out into the truck after months of suffering. And then they see you as the activist, and surely they have so much trauma, but there is that one chance where you get to say, not everybody's like that.
Yep. Oh yeah, for sure. Because that's all they've experienced their whole life is. And you can see that with certain types of animals. Like you'll go up to the truck and they're just like trying to back away, or they're screaming. But there's some that are curious, and I guess still have some trust in humans, and will come up to the edge of the truck and touch your hand or try and suckle on it. Yeah, definitely. So you're right.
Then take me to the duck protests that you've been to. Tell me about that, because I think when we're talking about connection to life, this is a good way to discuss the other forms of activism where it's direct.
Yeah. I started that for the first time this year. So it started in March of this year. I had a friend who already was doing duck rescue that let me know. I had been wanting to do something like this for a long time. So they had an opening week. I went there for the weekend. So it was about 3.5 hour drive up to this specific wetland. And so I joined a group called the Coalition Against Duck Shooting, that has been around since the 80s. And so I joined them, and I remember on my first day, we got up bright and early in the morning, 4 a.m. We get together as a team, and we convoy. We decide which wetland we're going to go to. So we went to a wetland, and so we get there maybe an hour before shooting starts. And on my first day, it was like the adrenaline was rushing. I knew what I was, somewhat getting myself into. And so, yeah, we got to this wetland. we, geared up, and then the gun started, and it was like, whoa, it was a lot to take in, and we could kind of see all the different shooters' camps along, and it was a huge moment. I was like, this is actually happening, and yeah, on that day, then we wait till a certain time until shooting kind of stops. And so what happens is people are put into different teams, and we'll go out into the water and retrieve any injured ducks. Also dead ducks as well. So any ducks that have been shot and may be deceased. So with like shooters, they are supposed to retrieve any duck they shoot, but unfortunately that's not the case most of the time. So, so I remember going into the water on the first day, a couple of people in kayaks, walking in there and, for hours on end in the water, coming out, coming back in. It was just insane, the number of ducks that were retrieved by activists. It was just again and again and again. And kind of towards the end of that day that we were at that wetland, I had the opportunity to rescue my first duck, which was a huge moment. So that duck was a pink-eared duck, and we kind of had nets with us. I was with a couple of activists, and they were like, okay, there's a duck over there who's been shot but is still alive. And it was just, the adrenaline was running. I was like, I've got to do this. And so there were 4 of us. I was in the water. There were some people in kayaks, just, running around the place trying to get this duck, and eventually was able to scoop under and got her. And it was just, I felt very accomplished, because you're right out there in the action and able to, kind of have the chance to save someone's life.
And what was that like, saving that life? What did you see? What did you see when you looked into her eyes? What did you see?
Yeah, I saw hope for her, that, that duck would get a second chance at life. It was really special moment. And I think the thing that really makes it even better is she actually ended up surviving, which can be not as common with this operation. Most ducks that are retrieved and have been shot tend to have really bad injuries that they have to be euthanized, but I ended up finding out later that night that duck ended up surviving, which was just, it's so beautiful to hear that, and ended up, getting taken out back into the wild and had a second chance at life, which was just insane to me. Having that as my first duck rescue and being able to do that was just, I can't even explain it, really. It was just, it was really special.
Your perspective on what you've explained to me is kind of a viewpoint of seeing hope in the violence, and that takes a lot of strength, because the whole thing is a tragedy. We have vegans and non-vegans who watch this podcast, people who consume animals, they consume chicken, they consume duck, who would say that duck hunters are despicable human beings, and the people who go hunting and trophy hunting are despicable human beings. I would say that they are despicable, disgusting human beings. What fascinates me is that all of those people who consume animals daily, who will go out and get a duck curry from their local Thai restaurant, will find those duck hunters disgusting and despicable. And I'm kind of shocked that it's been going on for decades. So you were out there this year, but this coalition started in the 1980s and it is still going. So it's taught violence from one generation to the next generation. And then we have a numb society who would say, oh, those duck hunters are despicable. They're horrible. Hey, what do you want for dinner? Let's go get a duck curry from the Thai restaurant up the road.
Yep.
How have you ever thought of, that deep? I mean, I think some really crazy, deep, weird philosophical thoughts.
Yeah,
But I'm
no.
usually caught up in the hypocrisy of it all.
Mm.
And
Yeah, definitely.
that's how things keep happening. That's why violence is allowed to happen, because they say, well, as long as you can do this, it's only about this much, just a few ducks. So those people can go shoot those ducks. But yes, it's horrible, but we'll allow it.
Mm.
But you put that across all aspects, that somebody might say how horrible a slaughterhouse worker is, but they benefit, and then they'll go and have some bacon. And yet you are the one that's looking into their eyes, those animals' eyes. And I would have thought that a lot of animals who are living in such oppression and torture are just confused. Imagine you're
Mm.
flying in the sky and you get shot out of the sky, and suddenly you're in pain because you don't know why. And if you're a human looking through this, you would know it's because someone shot you, but you're just in pain and confused and falling from the sky, living in peace until someone shot you. And now you've got this piece of metal stuck inside of you, and you're falling, and you're gasping for air, and you're fighting for every breath, and someone wants you dead and you don't know why. And you, as the activist, picks up that animal and looks into their eyes. What are your thoughts when you look into their eyes? What do you see?
Yeah, I see the confusion. I see the kind of like the look in their eyes. Like the duck that I just talked about, that wasn't actually the only duck I rescued this year, you know. I had 3 others, and kind of each time, yeah, I saw this kind of similar look in their eyes, like confused, like why me? I didn't do anything wrong. And you know, that's the only life they get, and it's just some cruel, evil, careless person has shot them, no consideration, for the fact that that is their only life they get to live, and that has just been taken away from them like nothing. And I think that is a huge, because that's, I think, what really stuck in my head during duck shooting season. As you know, beautiful as those experiences was, giving that duck a second chance, there was so much anger because I was there, like, you know, I had shooters, you know, yelling things at us and, you know, being the scums that they are, the, you know, lovely people that they are. Yeah, it was very aggravating, like the fact that this is still going on, and, you know, looking in those ducks' eyes, like, why me? What did I do to deserve this? Like, what's going on? They're terrified. They can't flap their wings, or they, you know, they'll have blood coming out of their mouth. And it's just, that's kind of after, you know, I was able to rescue these ducks. That's kind of like everything came rushing in, like, oh my God, you know, this is just, yeah, it's disgusting. It's just an innocent being who, has been shot by a human who hasn't even gone to retrieve them. And it's definitely, you know, these shooters say, oh, we do it because we're hunting and gathering, which I think is just stupid. They pay thousands of dollars for a gun. They live in a house. And you know, the size of the meat that actually comes out of the duck is probably the size of a chicken nugget. And they say that feeds the whole family. I definitely think it's not that. It's just the exhilaration these shooters get out of shooting these birds, seeing them fall out of the sky. I think most of them just do it for fun and don't even think about retrieving the animals, you know, following those laws. Yeah.
What did some of the pardon me, what did some of the hunters yell at you?
Oh, just just a lot
Greenie?
of swearing. Yeah, definitely that. A lot of swearing. I had a couple of um interactions with them, just saying, kind of like what a nuisance we are, and kind of like disgusting gestures that they would make at us activists. Which I, wasn't surprised by. I was expecting that. And also just hearing other stories from the other duck rescuers who had been doing it since the 90s. And it was like I was surprised by these actions, but also not at the same time. But yeah, just a lot of swearing from them. And I think the sad bit was there was quite a few families as well I saw. Those shooters were like dads or mums, and they're teaching these kids this cycle of violence is okay. And it really, especially as a young person, it really angers me to see that, because that's these are our new generations, and we're teaching them the same thing we have been doing for hundreds of years, and it just needs to stop. It really does. So yeah.
I was interviewing an activist in our last podcast, Lachlan, and we started talking about what level of depravity are you willing to accept? And, through the eyes of people who consume animals. And, when they go to a slaughterhouse where something is considered legal and illegal is really just a stroke of a pen, if a lamb who's dying, terrified, takes an extra 30 seconds to die because, he woke up after being knocked in the head, or, he struggled a little bit more. Where someone is out in the swamps shooting down a duck, or they go out into the forest and shoot a deer for fun, and then somebody will go to a restaurant, where a seafood restaurant, for example, where there are lobsters sitting in just a jar waiting to die. And it's interesting that there would be some people who would be eating at that restaurant that would pick out, I'll take that lobster, thank you, who would have a problem with duck hunters, who would have a problem with people who go deer hunting. And they would say those people are deplorable. Yet those people sitting at that restaurant choosing to end the life of that lobster who was subjugated, that was stuck in that little jar, or a little aquarium, although I wouldn't call it that, is choosing to kill that animal, and at the same time, admonishing and saying how horrible, this duck hunter is, or, how horrible the slaughterhouse worker is. And you have to wonder what the question is, what level of depravity is depraved? Is it just a little bit, or is it all?
Yeah, definitely. It kind of makes me think of something Terry said, actually, in terms of like meat eaters choosing like what forms of like entertainment or other animal exploitation, saying, oh, that's horrible, kind of having a meat eater say, oh, I don't agree with rodeos, I don't agree with circuses. I remember Terry saying to me, he's like, when someone says that to you, tell them, they have lost that right to judge someone for that, because they are just as bad as someone who rides, on cows, or, is at a rodeo, and shoots ducks. Like, you have lost that privilege to judge them when you pay for animals to be slaughtered, or if you're at a restaurant and you choose to pick out, what fish or lobster you want to pick. Just, you're either against the exploitation of animals or you're not. It can't be. It just cannot be in between. But unfortunately, that's how this world is. So yeah, that's definitely something I've noticed a lot, especially in the last, year or so doing activism, and
You've
yeah,
noticed more hypocrisies in adulthood.
yeah, yeah. Well, like different types, I guess. Yeah, but I think the first one I kind of noticed when I started activism 3 years ago was obviously kind of the thing about loving, companion animals, but the animals that are, killed for food, that's fine. That's something I've always kind of known. But I guess in terms of you know, people being like, oh yeah, duck shooting, zoos or circuses, that's horrible. That's something I've seen more of a trend in people talking to me about that, including family members. And I take that opportunity to be like, well, why? Why do you think that's bad? And trying to connect that to the choices that they're making against,
Yeah.
animals' lives so they can eat them.
Why is that bad? So people will say how horrible it is duck hunting, how the duck hunters are horrible people. Yet they will buy a pillow that has down in it. It'll have
Well,
duck feathers in it. No problem whatsoever with that. But duck hunters, to be shot out of the sky and have your head blown off and die suddenly would probably be a lot better, realistically, than
mhm,
what goes in to creating a down pillow. And they don't get that. And so it comes down to what level of depravity you, as the non-vegan, not you, but just in general, what level of depravity are you willing to put up with? Is
mm,
it just one little bit of depravity, or a little, if it's you that's not the victim, is all of it okay? Or is just a little bit of it okay? And the idea is none of it is okay. And these people will say they're against animal cruelty, and yet, and they'll evidence that by saying how horrible duck hunting is, but point out their own cruelty and their own participation in that cruelty, and suddenly, well, they'll come up with every reason out there to exploit an animal when they don't need to. Mm. Let's talk about Dominion. So, what's the work you've done with Dominion?
um, so I think the first time I ever kind of like did any form of activism with them was, yeah, it was, I think, a couple of months into me doing activism, and I did I remember doing a small disruption, regarding, farrowing crates and, the, what happens to pigs, and mother, pigs inside, farms. And I remember it was all planned out. I was with a couple of other, activists, and we went into, a Coles in the city. And so we all went in there and we sat down in front of, the pork section, holding up signs. Some of us, including me, had like paint that we put on our hands and then hold our hands like this, signifying people have blood on their hands if you're paying for this. So that was the first thing I did with them. And then more recently, for the last couple of months now, I've been doing outreach with them that they'll do in the city on Sundays. So sometimes they focus on specific campaigns that they have running. They recently had one on the egg industry, and we had one on the dairy industry. So I've been doing that with them, and I really enjoy their approach. And I've gotten to, work with, the most amazing activists, and being able to kind of do outreach with the person that made the Dominion documentary is just incredible. I'm very honoured to have done that. So yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing with them, and yeah, it's very, very interesting approaches that they have. I really enjoy it.
Well, if it wasn't for Chris Delforce, a lot of that footage that we show on those screens would never have been obtained. And the
Exactly.
amount of mental health um, damage, I believe, that somebody in that position will have just means that the more of us are out there to support his work, the better. Because we benefit on our screens from all of his trauma. And he would have seen so much of it. He's sat
Mm.
there inside the slaughterhouses. He's been driven. He's done things that none of us would have the guts to do. He just did it. And now we benefit from that. And in a sad way, the animals benefit from it as well because it gets their story out. It would be like if somebody was to sneak into a concentration camp with a camera during World War II and get into the gas chambers and just film. People would be horrified by what they see. Yet
Yeah.
people have to turn their eyes away when they see animal slaughter footage. And imagine being there and watching it with your own two eyes, and
Yeah.
you can't break. You can't make yourself known. You have to capture the footage. So it's almost like you have to push something down in. Pardon me. You'd have to push something down inside of yourself in order to get that footage out there, and then hope to God that people will join you to show the world.
Yeah. Yep.
So then that brings me to another question: is now that the footage is out there, and now that you're able to get that truth out there, what is the reaction of the public in general? Because you're dealing with a population of apathy, and you're dealing with a population of people that just don't educate themselves on key things. So, from your perspective, what has been the reaction? And was it the reaction that you would have expected? Or do you feel that maybe, like a lot of activists, we think that the world needs to know, they'll all change as soon as they see this? But then we get into it and something else happens.
Mm.
Tell me. I want to hear about your
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. So, what I see generally, um, there's really a variety of reactions, but I think the most common, if I had to pick kind of like the top three, there would be, families with their children covering the kids' eyes and be like, don't look at that, and kind of giving us the look like, how could you be showing this to children? And we do have, families being like, there's children around, you shouldn't be showing this. Another reaction is probably from farmers or people who've worked in slaughterhouses being like, that's not what happens, you guys don't know anything. And probably another reaction is people laughing, which at first doing activism I was kind of surprised by because, that's a pretty sick thing to do. But I think I've realized that it's kind of like a defense mechanism because people are feeling uncomfortable. They're laughing to kind of make up for it. And so that's kind of like the top three I see. But I do see a lot of people that especially stop to watch the footage. You'll see the disgust on their face, and that's when we take that moment to go and chat to them. That we do get. I've seen, like, especially lately. It can also depend on where you're doing the outreach. I find different locations have different kind of demographics of people. So some places might have, more empathetic reactions where people will stop, or you'll see, people like really disgusted. And then other locations where you'll have a lot of people, laughing at you, or farmers and like slaughterhouse workers, getting really angry and amped up, like, how can you show this? This is not what's happening on my farm. You guys don't know anything, or, do you have the right to show this to people? So yeah, it's really a mix of everything. You don't really know what you're going to get each time you're doing outreach. It really depends on kind of maybe where you are and the type of people that are walking past. So, yeah.
And then there's the apathy and the excuse making.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Normally when people stop, you get that. I've had a couple of people, it's really strange, that have come up to me being like, that's not real. Like, it's AI, which I know AI is getting a lot better these days.
However, even if it is AI, let's just entertain the idea that it's AI. AI needs to train on learning models, which means what it's doing is sucking in vast amounts of video and photos, real stuff. So even if AI pumped out a 5-second video, and anything more than 5 seconds just looks really weird. If you pumped out 5 seconds of video of a pig being killed, the AI had to have obtained that footage from somewhere to learn from.
Yeah.
Even if. So they can say it's AI, but it has to have been drawn from somewhere.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, no. So yeah, that's definitely a reaction that is really strange. But I inform people on, this is where it's come from. This is standard practice. And then you kind of get people who are like, this. We'll tell them, that this is, footage from here in Australia, and they'll be like, oh, but this doesn't happen across the world, and they're like, oh,
But it's a
no.
lot worse somewhere else, and it's really horrible here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's kind of like trying to get people into that conversation, because some people can be really amped up and won't stop. They'll just yell at something at you and just keep walking. And then we get like kind of a lot of people just kind of, if they are walking past and laughing, and you kind of stop them and be like, why do you think this is funny? Have you seen something like this before? How does it make you feel? And yeah, you kind of get some people which I kind of think is a defense mechanism some of the time, who will just be like, oh, like, yum, that looks so good. Or, who like laugh at the footage of what's happening. And think, oh, like, that's funny, like, oh, I don't really care. And I think those are the kind of people where I tend to maybe finish the conversation, or not continue a conversation, because I know that I probably might not get anywhere with them, or, it can take a lot of energy out of you as a activist with people, with no empathy. So, yeah.
I think when people look at the TV screens, there is this lack of connection with belief and truth. And there is the brainwashing that the market out there does. So they don't want to see the truth. Their brain just can't handle that truth. And we have handled that truth, and we've taken it on board and made those changes. It is not the same as cutting up a watermelon or an orange. And if people were to come up and say, oh, this is horrible, with their kids, and cover their eyes and have that, debate with you, you shouldn't be showing this footage. And then you'd ask them, well, I'm sorry, are you vegan? And they'll say, well, no. And you could easily come back and say, well, let's be real here. This is just food for you. This is just a preparation of your food. So what's the problem? And if it's not good for your eyes, then it's not good for your stomach. And it does tell me that people do have the empathy. They just don't know how to access it. They have the empathy, and then they keep pushing it away. Whereas someone in your position, who has been there for a vigil, who has been there for the ducks, and has likely had animals, animal family members, or known some, you have this inherent connection with the one-on-one.
Yeah.
Pardon me, that one being that is struggling for life, as opposed to, thousands. Sometimes it's so ridiculously huge that people couldn't even fathom. You look at World War II and you'd say, oh, well, 3 million Jewish people were gassed, whatever the overall number is. And it's too vast for you to actually connect and have empathy more than, oh, that's bad. But if you would hear one person's story, a one child's story of how they suffered, it would alter your entire perspective on the entire thing. And it's the same thing. I had a dog recently pass, and she came from a really horrible background. And we can say, there's thousands of dogs out there that are mistreated and then put into, foster care, or they're murdered inside of a pound. But until you have that connection with that one life, and you can see that one life is struggling for life, and they want to live, and they want to be left in peace, that's when you really understand veganism.
100%. 100%. You're totally right.
Have you had any of those experiences where it solidified you as a vegan?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially, when I have, been face to face with animals, and then you kind of, you've been with those animals that are suffering, and then you might go to do outreach the same day, and you kind of talk to people who, may not show, they might have that empathy in them, but they're not showing that towards you, for the animals. It can be really hard at times. It can be frustrating when you have seen that face to face, and then you feel that, the person you're talking to doesn't care, or, is laughing. And, but I think, the majority of people do care about animals, and do have that in them. It's just it's just in, like, the process of, opening their eyes and their heart, to seeing something like this. Because it can be hard, fathoming the scale of how many animals are actually killed, and that disconnect as well. I definitely feel that it can almost be, it's a big change, from seeing it on a screen compared to in real life. It's horrible seeing it on screen, but sometimes, being at these places and actually seeing the animals, smelling, the feces and the death, and really hearing, their screams is just a whole different thing. And it definitely can be hard as an activist, seeing that and then outreaching people. And, you do have some not struggling, but some, conversations where you feel that you're not getting through to someone, or someone's just kind of putting up that wall, which I, totally understand. I did that, and it's easier to do that because you don't want to know the truth. You don't want to feel that guilt or that shame for paying for these animals to be killed. So yeah, that's kind of my experience with it.
So just two additional questions that I've got for you is, one is, how do we normalize not being cruel to animals and making vegan just absolutely the only way to go, and that being an animal exploiter or a non-vegan is just weird and wrong in society? How do you see we are doing that, or how do we do that?
The one thing that comes to my mind is some videos that I've seen of Gary Roski, just the way that he kind of has talked about what we do to animals, and he makes it so it's just, he puts it in such a way that it's just so, like, practical and just makes sense. Kind of like what I do when talking to people is I'll use the proper names for certain foods. So in terms of, like, normalizing veganism and, trying not to, normalise exploitation for, other people, put it in that way for them, is I'll use the proper names for certain foods. So instead of saying, pork or beef or milk, I'll use, breast milk, baby pigs, or, veal, or, cows. I'll really take people through the process of how their food is made, especially when I come across families at times, especially mothers, and I kind of, in a way, try and put themselves in the positions of mother cows, and, the fact that it's very, very strange what we do. We're the only species that, drinks breast milk after, we're babies, and really, really educating people on how obscure the whole process is. What we do in order to breed animals, what these farmers do in order to, make a mother dairy cow pregnant, or a sow. It's not nice to talk about these things, but I think people need to know, and I think really taking them through those step-by-step processes of what happens to animals, and I see the face like people make when I'm telling them, kind of making them realize how extreme this process is, of how people get their food. And another thing is kind of coming back to, when people are like, I've been doing this for thousands of years, our ancestors did this, and I'll kind of reply to people, saying, we're not in a survival situation anymore. And then people kind of come back to, oh, we've been made for this though. Biologically, if you look at us, we're meat eaters. And I kind of ask people questions about, okay, well, tell me, what makes you think that? And they'll be like, oh, we've got canines. And I'm like, well, where are your canines? And I'm like, your teeth look pretty flat, like a cow's teeth. And, or if I've talked to people who are hunters, and they're like, oh, it's natural, it's better for us to do this, and, it's what we're made for, and, it's natural for us. And, I kind of reply with, oh, well, if it's natural, we shouldn't be eating guns or knives, or, same with slaughterhouses. If we're naturally supposed to eat animals, we would have the biological features, the claws, the sharp teeth, the, massive amount of hair on our body, those kind of things, which I kind of heard from Gary when he would reply to people who said, we've got canines, and he'd be like, with how we look and how our teeth are designed, the way our jaw moves, how our hands are, it's really wacky when people try and justify that. And I'm just trying to put that in a way for people that they kind of realize, like, oh yes, you are right. I can't go into the wild and kill an animal with my bare hands. So it's things kind of like that I try and tell, people in a way to make them kind of think like, oh, actually, yeah, that is really strange. And then they kind of, step back for a moment and think, oh, okay, I don't want to be a part of this, based on what you've told me. So those are kind of the things I try and communicate with people to not normalize this anymore for them.
If you asked most people, they wouldn't be able to take a life themselves.
Yeah.
If you stripped a human naked and put them in a forest, they'd be dead in 2 days. Their feet cannot handle even stepping on stones. They get scratches easily. They will get infections very quickly out in the forest. If you take that same person and you put them out in a desert, they'll be dead in just a few days. They can't handle having no water. Their skin will burn. They are prone to getting cancer, skin cancers, and they will die of cancer. If you were to put that same person in the snow, They will be dead in 1 or 2 days. Their body cannot handle the extreme cold. They need clothing. They need a safe home. Anything that involves going out into the forest with a gun is a choice
Yep.
because they've got every modern comfort at home. They do not need to do these things. And I find that quite fascinating where you actually can call them out on that, where they might say, well, humans have done this for thousands of years. Okay, well, humans used to die at age 35 to 40, and now we're living to 100. Do you want to go by that rule? And if not, okay, what's the next thing that they're going to come up with? And they'll say, well, we get to build buildings and animals can't build buildings. Excuse me, have you ever seen a termite mound? Have you ever seen ants in the wild and how they work together? And then I'll ask them, so you're saying you can build a building? Well, no, I can't build a building. Okay, it's not you personally. Yeah, but we've got antibiotics. Okay, so you know how to create antibiotics yourself. You know how to do it. Well, no. Okay, so you're as useless as, as the next person because most
100%.
people can't do those things. So if they're wondering what is an animal's existence, what is your existence? And it's the answer is the same. You value your life as much as they value their life, and they just want to be left alone, just like you want to be left alone. You want to enjoy your existence; they want to enjoy their existence, and you are pushing, your pleasures onto somebody else's pain for you. So you're in a deficit already. Have you, as a final kind of wrap up question, do you see? Well, what do you see in the world with people being vegan? Do you see more or less, or do you see a change slowly? What do you see?
Yeah, it's something I think about most days. I personally think that I won't be here for a vegan world. I would love that. I really would. But I think, definitely, I think, maybe in 50 years, there will be a big change, but I think I won't be here for a vegan world. I would love to be. But I'm definitely working towards that each day. And I think, being someone in the younger generation, that's something that you just motivates me every day to see that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
50 years, you'll be 70 and you're going to live to over 100 as a vegan. Probably live to 150 as a vegan. I'm aiming for at least 110 to 120. So I need to do this every day. Even when my teeth are falling out, my hair's falling out, I'll still be on my walking frame and you better go vegan. I'm going to see that day. That's the aim.
yeah.
I have a work function coming up in a little while, and the person who's organizing it says, I think there's more of you than there are of us now because, it's having to find a vegan place. A bunch of you have asked us for a vegan restaurant. And I thought, that's fascinating. So there is a small switch. There is a small change going on. And it pays to be hopeful. And the only way we are going to see a world where animals are not exploited and that we see a lot of peace, calm, and happiness in this world is when we all connect to that one living being and see that they, like us, want to live in peace. And we need to see the truth that the violence that we commit through our own apathetic choices is what is causing so much harm in the world around us and even in ourselves, all the lack of inner peace and the full hypocritical conflict we have in ourselves is because we don't take animals off our plate and we don't want to admit that our choices are causing so much harm. And I think that is going to be the big switch. And I think you being out there with the other activists, calling people into account and pointing out those hypocrisies are the key changes every week, whether it's just one activist, Annie showing up every week, or a group of, activists showing up each week, just calling one person into account, 10 people into account, 100 people into account, it's all going to have a snowball effect.
100%. I could have said it. I couldn't have said it better myself.
We'll get there. I think we're going to get there.
I think so.
Is there any final thoughts that you have today that you want to impart on the viewers?
Just to open your heart and your minds, and educate yourself. If you're someone who calls yourself an animal lover, then being vegan is the best way to go to align your morals and be vegan. And we want to live in a world where people love and appreciate animals.